Nneka stands at the edge of a dense forest, her posture poised as she gazes into the distance, the wind rustling the leaves around her. The sun filters through the trees, casting a warm glow on her face, highlighting both her strength and the weight of secrets hidden deep within. Nneka and Chidi stand under the shade of a large tree, their hands nearly touching as they look at each other with longing. The forest behind them is bathed in golden light, but a shadow of tradition looms between them, representing the barrier they face in their forbidden love. Nneka stands behind Chief Okeke in their grand compound, her hands clasped together as she watches her daughters play. The contrast between her love for them and the coldness of her marriage is reflected in her posture and the distance between her and her husband, the air thick with unspoken emotions. Amara and Obi stand by the river bank, their faces close as they speak softly to each other, surrounded by vibrant greenery. The sunlight bounces off the river, illuminating their secret, stolen moments of joy as the rest of the world disappears in the background. Amara and Obi sit on a fallen log by the river, their faces close, eyes locked with a mix of love and fear. The leaves of the trees cast dancing shadows on the water, a visual metaphor for the danger that lurks behind their growing love. Nneka stands at the entrance of their family compound, her posture rigid as she watches Amara walk inside, her daughter's distant gaze betraying her inner conflict. The sky behind them begins to darken, foreshadowing the storm of emotions and tradition that is about to unfold. In the quiet of their shared bedroom, Amara leans close to Kamsi, her voice a hushed whisper as she reveals her love for Obi. The room is dimly lit, the shadows adding a layer of secrecy to the scene as Kamsi's eyes widen with surprise and curiosity. Nneka stands outside under the pale glow of the moon, her face filled with fear and determination. The wind blows gently through the trees, carrying the whispers of her past as she prepares herself for the difficult conversation she must have with her daughter. Nneka and Amara sit side by side in their modest home, the sunlight filtering through the small windows as Nneka speaks, her hands gesturing gently. Amara looks away, her eyes filled with thoughts of Obi, as her mother's words echo like a distant caution. Nneka pauses at the threshold of their home, her hand resting on the doorframe, unsure if she should reveal Amara's secret to her husband. The shadows of the past seem to wrap around her, mixing with her fear of what will happen if she remains silent. Nneka kneels before the village elders under the shade of a large tree, her voice low as she tells them of the rumors she has heard. The elders sit in a semicircle around her, their faces lined with years of experience, their expressions unreadable as the weight of tradition hangs heavy in the air. Inside the family hut, the tension is palpable as Chief Okiki looms over Amara, his voice raised in anger. Amara, small and fragile before him, pleads for understanding while Nneka stands in the background, her face pale with regret for the events she has set in motion. Amara walks along a dirt road, the village far behind her, her shoulders slumped in defeat. The sun sets in the distance, casting a warm orange glow over the land, while the future stretches uncertainly ahead of her. In the shadows, Nneka watches her daughter leave, her own heart breaking in silence. Obi stands alone near the village entrance, his fists clenched in frustration as he watches Amara's silhouette fade into the horizon. The sky above him is heavy with clouds, mirroring the weight of the loss in his heart, as villagers cast judgmental glances in his direction. Nneka sits by a dimly lit window, her reflection barely visible in the small, cracked mirror before her. Her hands rest in her lap, and her face is lined with regret as she grapples with the consequences of her actions. Outside, the village continues to move on, unaware of the storm raging inside her. Amara sits cross legged on the floor of a small, dusty hut, her eyes focused on the future as her relatives move around her, casting cold glances. The walls of the hut feel confining, but Amara's spirit remains unbroken as she begins to plan her escape. Kamsi stands with her arms crossed, her face filled with rebellion as she stares down her mother. Nneka, her posture stiff, tries to reason with her youngest daughter, but the distance between them seems to grow with every word spoken. The air is thick with tension as the house, once filled with warmth, feels colder than ever. Chief Oke walks through the village, his regal robe dragging in the dust behind him, as he avoids the prying eyes of the villagers. His once commanding presence is diminished by the weight of shame, and the whispers follow him like a shadow. In the distance, the compound feels like an empty fortress, a reminder of the family he has lost. Nneka sits beside a small fire, her face illuminated by the dancing flames as she listens to the gossip about Amara's escape. The firelight flickers, casting long shadows on the walls of the compound, as Nneka feels a mixture of fear and hope stirring within her, knowing her daughter has defied tradition in pursuit of love. Nneka walks through the thick, shadowy forest, the trees towering above her like silent guardians. Her steps are quick, and her heart races as she navigates the winding path. The light barely pierces the canopy, and Nneka's mind is filled with memories of her own past as she pushes forward, desperate to find her daughter before it's too late.